Hey, what's up guys? Joker here, and I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to RTX 3080 Embargo Day, and if you are choosing to watch my video today, I thank you very much for choosing it among the dozens of others out there that you could be watching right now, and maybe you already watched some of those and you wanted to see my numbers as well. Either way, I thank you for being part of the audience out there that is going to check out this video. As it was a lot of work testing these cards, excited to get into today's numbers, testing on the RTX 3080 Founders Edition. Aftermarket card embargoes lift tomorrow, but I have not gotten any aftermarket cards yet. I am going to be testing the RTX 3080 Founders Edition up against the RTX 2080 Ti Founders Edition card. Just really wanted to do this matchup between these two cards as for a couple of reasons. Well, for one, over on Twitter, I actually asked you guys what you are most interested to see it tested against, and it was pretty astounding that 2080 Ti took the vote with 68.8%, and the closest behind that was the 2080 with 14.7%, which really is what this card is replacing in terms of price, but with all of the promises being made by NVIDIA, I guess people are curious to see how this is going to stack up against what was previously a $1,200 2080 Ti, which is now more or less a $500 3070, which will be releasing on October 15th. So you guys already know the specs on these cards. I'm not going to waste your guys' time with any of that, because I know you want to get into the actual gaming benchmarks, which for this video we're done at 1440p and 4K. Before we do get into the benchmarks with the frame rates and the 1% lows, I just quickly want to explain the test setup that I was using here, as well as the testing methodology, which you'll be seeing on your screen right now. For this test setup, I was using an i7-8700K at 4.8 gigahertz, along with 16 gigabytes of RAM at 3200 megahertz. And as you can see for the GPUs, this was a 3080 and a 2080 Ti, both of them Founders Edition cards at their stock clock speeds. There was absolutely no overclocking or adjustments done to these cards in any way whatsoever. I just wanted to take these cards as a consumer, get them out of the box, and test them up against each other. And because of the high power, requirements of the RTX 3080, I was using a 1,000-watt 80-plus gold rated power supply. It's a Be Quiet PSU, I believe the Straight Power 11, if I'm not mistaken. And I was running on the press driver for the 3080 for both of the cards. This was provided out by NVIDIA to the press ahead of the release, which was 456.16. As far as the game testing methodology, all of the games were tested at the maximum or the ultra preset. Basically, whatever the highest available preset was in a given title, that is what I used for 1440p and 4K at native resolution. As you can see noted there at the bottom, DLSS was not used in any of the titles that I tested here, but I am planning to go back and do a video just dedicated on strictly ray tracing and DLSS, as I feel that really could be a topic for its own lengthy video, more than what we could fit into a product review like I'm doing here today. But I definitely used ray tracing, as you can see here, which was used on the highest setting for any titles that did happen to have ray tracing in it. So if a game had ray tracing available, I used it, but I did not use DLSS because I really just wanted to see what these GPUs could do with their native resolutions when really pushed to the limit. And just like frame rates, I know especially with this, this launch of cards with the high TDPs on the 3080 as well as the 3090. The 3080 has a max TDP of 320 watts, while the 3090s end up going to be 350 watts is what NVIDIA is advertising right now. So a lot of people thought, these cards are, going to be pushing out a lot of heat and stuff like that. And also with the Founders Edition being such a new, interesting style of cooler, many people are, of course, curious about what the temperatures are like on these cards and what kind of power was being pushed out by these cards. So I was using a new benchmarking utility actually this time around called Cap Frame X, which I only just recently discovered. I believe it's been around for about a year now. Absolutely incredible piece of software that I need to give its own dedicated video in the coming days and maybe next week or something like that. But truly incredible. I'm going to give you guys a brief taste of it right now for those results on temperatures as well as power load when using the card, because that's one of the greatest things about this software is it doesn't just capture average frame rates, 1% lows, that kind of stuff. It does all of that, which makes those things simpler, but it also captures literally everything else, like CPU load, minimum, average, and max, GPU load, minimum, average, and max, your GPU load, the GPU clock speeds, the temperatures, the power output, RAM usage, literally everything is captured by this software. It's the greatest piece of software in the history of benchmarking, in my personal opinion. Not sponsored in any way whatsoever. I just discovered this software like 4 days ago, and I'm in love with it. So I'm going to take you into it right now, where I'm going to be showing you some results on the RTX 3080 Founders Edition. This was run for about 30 minutes on the Heaven benchmark, just running on a loop. I just had the benchmark going over and over and over again at 4K so I can share with you guys some of these statistics. But really the most important ones in regards to this are going to be the GPU temperature and the GPU power output. As you can see here for the GPU power represented in watts, the minimum power was recorded at 279 watts, the average was 315, while the maximum was 318. So during that run on the Heaven benchmark, it averaged 315 watts of total draw just from the GPU. So that's a little bit under the 320 watts it's promised on the box, but that's not to say you won't see that in some games and titles. It definitely can get up to 320 watts, and I did see that, but in Heaven, that was not the case. And of course, if you get to overclocking, it's probably going to push that up a bit more. And then in terms of temperatures, very impressed with the Founders Edition cooler. They did an excellent job with this. The minimum temp recorded here was 60, the average was 66, and the maximum was 68 degrees Celsius. And again, that's on an extended run of the Heaven benchmark, running the card at 100% load, more or less, or 99% load the entire time at 4K. So this card should have been absolutely cooking, and it maxed out at 68 degrees Celsius. During all of my benchmarking and playing games over the course of the last week, the highest temp that I saw on this card was maybe about 72, and that was with like ray tracing stuff, and I was playing the game for quite a while on Battlefield 5 at 4K and everything, with everything completely maxed out. So as far as a Founders Edition or a reference style cooler is concerned, I know this is not technically not a reference PCB and all that, but as far as a Founders Edition card or a card directly from NVIDIA, or comparing it to cards that come directly from AMD, temperatures, excellent. And I am curious to see how well the aftermarket cards can do, because the Founders Edition card does a superb job at cooling. It was also very quiet as well. I don't have any decibel measuring tools or anything like that, but it was basically inaudible to me inside of a closed system. I was running all of this inside of a closed case, a closed Be Quiet case, no less, which is basically a fucking tank. It doesn't have the greatest airflow in the world, but of course I have front intake fans, rear exhaust, top-mounted all-in-one cooler for the CPU. So, I've got the fans and everything like that configured properly, but it's a very closed-off case with a closed-off front and all of that, and the temperatures were still what I would consider to be excellent, and even more than excellent for what I've seen with other Founders Edition graphics cards. So, very impressive job from NVIDIA on the cooler, in my personal opinion, and the testing that I did over the past week. But with all of that out of the way, let's get into the game benchmarks. We will start off with 1440p, average FPS and 1% lows, and then we will move over to 4K, average FPS as well as 1% lows. I will be doing a dedicated video on 1080p if people want to see that, an overkill benchmarking video like I've done for the past few product launches. And also I will be doing a dedicated video on ultra wide, so definitely stay tuned for those videos coming up in the next week or so. But again, starting off at 1440p, you can see the 3080 and the 2080 Ti, and the 3080 is taking a significant lead in pretty much every single title. Of course, some titles are closer than others, but realistically, 1440p and 4K, we're looking at anywhere from like 25 to 35% performance uplift over the RTX 2080 Ti. And before people say, oh, well, that's like the 100% performance uplift that was promised. Well, no, that was promised for over the 2080, not the 2080 Ti. So taking these numbers here, I would say that over a 2080, it would probably be double the increase of what we're seeing here over the 2080 Ti. So this is a $1,200 graphics card, which was $1,200 like 3 weeks ago, which are now selling for like $500 on eBay, and the 3070 is basically going to have this performance, and you could see what the 3080 is doing to it and this is going to be retailing for significantly less. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, about 10 FPS faster, which was a lot closer. That game can be fairly CPU bound, so that might be kind of like a worst case scenario right there, as well as maybe any other CPU bound titles you might play. Battlefield 5 with ray tracing, completely pushed up to Ultra. Again, no DLSS, went from 78 up to 103. Borderlands 3 in DX11, which runs better in DX11, which is why I used it here, went from 83 up to 107. Control with ray tracing on, managed to gain 20 frames per second, making this game easily playable at 1440p with RTX maxed out and using no DLSS. F1 2020 in DX12 was a complete cakewalk, averaging 208 FPS on the 3080. Metro Exodus was easily the most brutal title in the benchmarks that I did here. This is a game where you would definitely want to use DLSS, even at 1440p, to get a respectable frame rate around 60 FPS, or possibly consider lowering some options. So that game is still pretty brutal, only averaging 59 FPS on the 3080. Rainbow Six Siege on Vulkan, completely ruining the graph as it topples at 319 frames per second at 1440p. Are you kidding me right now? Bring on the 1440p 360 hertz monitors if and whenever possible, or even 1440p 240 hertz monitors. As you can see, 2080 Ti running at 248 FPS there. This game is an absolute breeze. I'm going to have to really consider removing it from benchmarks in the future from such high-end cards, because it is absolutely just ruining the graph. Red Dead Redemption 2 in Vulkan, 116 FPS on the 3080, completely maxed out, 99 FPS on the 2080 Ti. Still very respectable, but good gains there for Red Dead 2. Shadow of the Tomb Raider with RTX, 95 FPS over the 73 and the 2080 Ti. And Division 2 in DX12, a very demanding title, getting 131 frames per second. What's that, like 34 FPS more than the 2080 Ti. Extremely impressive gains at 1440p. And I'll go ahead and flash up the 1% lows here for you guys if you want to go ahead and sift through that data as well for the kind of lows you might be expected to see. Again, this is 1% low of all frame times captured, not frame rate, frame times, which is then mathematically used to determine a frame rate. That's how you get a 1% low. Moving on to 4K, which I'm personally most interested in. As you can see here, the 3080 proving to be a very good, very capable 4K graphics card. And as someone that gamed on the 2080 Ti for the past couple of years at 4K, the 3080 is excellent for 4K. You know, stuff like Battlefield 5 at 4K, which would barely manage 60 FPS. You would need to use DLSS or basically turn off ray tracing to play it. I could tell you, running around a BF5, I was getting like 80 to 90, sometimes even 100 FPS on the Rotterdam map, which is where I tested, which I think is the map with the most ray tracing features, probably, at least from what I've seen. And that averaged 82 frames per second versus 60, which really means that the 2080 Ti was seeing a lot of drops below 60 if it was only averaging 60. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, very demanding title. That even managed to average 60 frames per second. And that's, again, that's like the ultra high preset, which has the fog pushed all the way up, which is an extremely demanding title. You could turn that off, probably get 80 frames per second average in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and you would never notice a visual degradation anyway whatsoever. Borderlands 3, another very demanding title at Ultra, comes up to 67 FPS. Control with RTX, extremely demanding, just like Metro Exodus here. Very demanding at 4K. Those are two titles where at 4K you're definitely going to want to be using deep learning super sampling. F1 and Rainbow Six, really not even worth talking about. Just toppling the entire graph with ridiculous frame rates, but they really do push the GPU to the max and really they're good games for testing. But yeah, just running a lot better than some of these other titles. Even though F1 2020 is like a brand new game, it's not as demanding as some of the other titles here with ray tracing and stuff. Red Dead Redemption 2 ran great, 93 average FPS versus 75 on the 2080 Ti, absolutely incredible. Shadow of the Tomb Raider got 53 versus 38. Again, you're going to want to use DLSS there, or just switch off ray tracing if it's not that important to you, as that was one of those titles where ray tracing honestly wasn't that visually evident anyway. And here is the 1% lows for the 4K Ultra preset if you want to go ahead and sift through those numbers at your leisure. So after all of that testing, what is my big takeaway on the RTX 3080? The takeaway is at the price they're selling it at, it is an incredible value. If you are choosing to buy an RTX 3080, you are getting one hell of a card. If we're talking strictly just about the Founders Edition, once again, to talk about what I was talking about earlier on in the video about temperatures, this card exceeded my expectations, especially when you consider this is a 320 watt card. It's a 320 watt card. The thing stayed under 70 degrees Celsius on a stress load run, okay? It's a very cool running card. It ran quiet. It delivered on the performance that was promised. Of course, with ray tracing stuff, again, that's going to be super demanding, really for any card. Even in RTX 3090, it's going to be super demanding if you're trying to run it at like native 4K resolution. So you're going to want to use DLSS for that type of stuff at a resolution as high as 4K. You're still going to need to be using DLSS, which is fine because DLSS has been getting better and better with 2.0. Now they're on like a 2.1 version, and it's only going to get better as time goes on. We saw with Death Stranding back when that came out. I did testing on that. The game actually looked better with DLSS versus native resolution. It's straight up voodoo magic. I don't know how it's working so well, but it really does work that well. So for any of these titles where you're seeing that frame rate, especially for a game with ray tracing and DLSS available as an option, you could easily go ahead and slap on DLSS and very likely be getting over 60 frames per second. So this, definitely for me is a replacement to my 2080 Ti. I will definitely be running this in my main system, at least until I could maybe get my hands on a 3090. But either way, I'm very happy with this card right now. It's taking most of the games that I was maybe struggling with at 4K and had to lower down some options, and it is making those games run at over 60 frames per second very easily, to the point where I can start to turn back up some options that I maybe had to turn down before. So very impressed with the RTX 30. I cannot really recommend it enough. AMD doesn't really have anything to compete with it right now, which is why it's not been included in this testing. And as evident over on Twitter, you guys weren't really interested in seeing it tested against something like a Radeon 7, which you can't even buy anyway, or a 5700 XT, which would have been kind of foolish to even test in this against the 3080. But of course, we got Big Navi around the corner. AMD just teased the cooler for that yesterday, which looks awesome. Can't wait to see what that card can do. Hopefully it compete with the 3080. If that thing can compete with the 3080, even though they might not have a 3090 competitor, I would be extremely surprised and pleased to see them having a competitor for what is, NVIDIA's flagship card is called by them, even though they have the 3090 coming, which is promising Titan-like performance, which is kind of like a TI more or less though, but it's more than double the price, only has about 20% more CUDA cores. So my guess is the performance uplift on that versus a 3080 is not going to be gigantic when it comes to gaming. Maybe at 4K, it might be a little bit more, but the 3080, I wouldn't feel bad at all about going out and picking one of these up based on just, you can really just read the specs of the 3080 versus the 3090 and pretty much know where that card is going to end up landing. And based on that, I would say the 3080 is a good buy, whether you go with a Founders card or an aftermarket card. Once those reviews are available on the 17th, and we can get some temperatures on those and see how it stacks up to the Founders card. I definitely look forward to seeing that, as well. As I told you, I have not got an aftermarket card, so I'm curious to see what those temperatures are like just right along with you guys compared to the Founders card. But highly recommend this one. NVIDIA has done a good job. They delivered on their promises, in my personal opinion. So please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on the RTX 3080 Founders Edition card, if you're going to be picking one up. Maybe you'll wait for the 3070. Again, if you're thinking about getting a 3070, the card's coming out October 15th, a month from where I'm recording this right now. That's probably going to be within like 1 to 2% of a 2080 Ti, and it's got less VRAM. So you could pretty much take the benchmarks from the 2080 Ti in this video, and that's probably what the 3070 is going to be. So this video can not only help with your decision on whether or not you want a 3080, but also whether or not it's something you want versus a 3070, because I think the numbers are going to be almost identical to the 2080 Ti here, only within a few percentage points, which is almost within the margin of error, honestly. So hopefully it kind of helps you with that decision as well if you're thinking about waiting for the $500 Ampere graphics card next month. So I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. I really enjoyed doing this video and the testing. Thank you for NVIDIA for sending out the card. And yeah, I'll catch you guys during the week for some more 3080 related content. I said, 1080p testing ultra-wide stuff. If there's anything else you want to see tested, leave it down in the comments below. I also want to do a video dedicated to just ray tracing and DLSS with every title that has it available in it. So that's something that I'm looking to do as well, probably in the next few days or week. So, but again, if there's anything else, let me know in the comments something you'd like to see, and I will try to do as much as possible. After this video, the next thing you'll probably be seeing is just raw benchmark footage from the games that I tested at 1440p and 4K like I like to do. For any launch, I just like to post all of the footage so you guys can really see the real-time data side by side. So I'll be posting those in dedicated videos, so stay on the lookout for that. I'm gonna go, and I will catch you guys next time for another video.